Can't fall asleep anymore? It's not what you think. If you wake up at 3 a.m. suddenly wide awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark, if your brain won't shut off the second your head touches the pillow, if your thoughts begin racing for no clear reason at night, if you feel completely exhausted during the day, yet strangely alert after sunset, if you've tried everything just to sleep through the night and still find yourself awake again for no obvious reason, this may not be insomnia the way you've been told, and it may not mean something is wrong with you, because when the brain refuses to power down, it's rarely random. There is usually a pattern happening beneath awareness, a biological shift that keeps the mind subtly alert, even when the body is tired enough to collapse, even when you desperately want rest. Sleep science has identified a protective state the brain can enter at night, a state that keeps you lightly vigilant instead of deeply asleep. It can trigger 3 a.m. awakenings without warning. It can make your brain feel like it won't shut off. It can prevent you from falling back asleep once you wake. And most people experiencing this have never heard its name. But understanding it changes everything, which is exactly where we're going next. I'm Dr. Sarah, a sleep medicine specialist with a background in psychiatry. For years, I've worked closely with men and women who struggle with insomnia after 40. Many of them never had sleep problems earlier in life. Then suddenly, something shifts. They begin waking up at 3 a.m. without knowing why. They feel their brain won't shut off at night, and they start wondering what changed. In my clinic, I hear the same phrases over and over. I can't fall asleep anymore. I wake up every single night around the same time. My thoughts start racing the moment the lights go out. I don't know how to stay asleep all night. Some of them feel anxious about it. Others feel confused and frustrated. What I explain to them almost always brings visible relief, because this isn't a lack of discipline, it's not a personality flaw, and it's not simply stress spiraling out of control. It's a biological pattern that sleep science now understands much more clearly, a pattern involving the brain's alert system. And once you see how that system works, everything begins to connect. After 40, the nervous system becomes more sensitive to subtle hormonal shifts. Cortisol patterns can change in ways that feel invisible during the day. Circadian rhythm timing can drift slightly off balance. None of this means something is broken, but it can make the brain more reactive at night, more protective, more likely to stay partially alert. This is why so many people who never had insomnia before suddenly find themselves unable to sleep through the night. They go to bed tired, they fall asleep for a few hours, then something switches on internally, a quiet surge of alertness, a feeling that the brain is awake before the body is ready. What most people don't realize is that this nighttime alertness isn't random. It follows a predictable biological pathway, a response that involves cortisol, the nervous system, and the timing of your circadian rhythm, and nighttime safety signaling inside the brain. Sleep science has given this response a name, and understanding that name is the key to understanding why your brain won't shut off, which is exactly what we'll explore next. Most people believe the problem is simple. They say, I can't fall asleep, or I just need to relax more. They assume it's about trying harder, improving habits, reducing stress, turning the mind off manually. But that's not the real issue. The real issue is timing. Your brain is entering brain alert mode at the exact moment it should be powering down. Instead of transitioning into deep restoration, it shifts into subtle vigilance, and that shift changes everything. When the brain enters brain alert mode at night, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like awareness, like your thoughts are suddenly clearer, like your senses are slightly sharper, even though your body is exhausted, even though you were just asleep minutes ago. This is why the sleep switch doesn't fully activate. The neurological cascade that supports deep sleep requires a sense of internal safety. When alertness remains partially online, that cascade gets interrupted, not completely blocked, but weakened. Sleep then becomes light, fragmented, unstable. You may fall asleep initially, but you wake up at 3 a.m. for no obvious reason. And once awake, your brain feels active again, as if morning arrived too early. The key shift to understand is that you are not failing to sleep. Your brain is preventing full shutdown. It's maintaining partial alertness on purpose, not to harm you, but to protect you. And that protective response has a specific biological name, which we need to look at next. Modern sleep science describes this state as the Neural Sleep Inhibition Response. It is not a disorder label. It is not a trend. It is a protective neurological pattern, a built-in safety mechanism within the brain, one that activates under specific biological conditions. The Neural Sleep Inhibition Response involves cortisol regulation, the balance of the nervous system, the timing of your circadian rhythm, and nighttime safety signaling inside the brain. These systems are designed to protect you, but sometimes they become overly sensitive. When this response activates at night, the brain does not fully power down. It remains partially alert, monitoring, scanning, maintaining subtle vigilance, even if your body feels completely exhausted, even if you were just asleep minutes ago. This is why you may fall asleep at first, but wake up at 3 a.m. without understanding why. It's why your brain feels active again, why your thoughts begin moving quickly, why it feels impossible to drift back off, not because you lack discipline, but because alert mode reactivated. For others, the pattern shows up differently. They lie down exhausted, yet can't fall asleep at all. Their brain won't shut off. Their mind feels busy without a clear trigger. The body is tired, but the nervous system is not fully settling. Different symptoms, same underlying mechanism. The neural sleep inhibition response doesn't always look identical from person to person, but the biological pathway is consistent. And once you understand how this pathway interacts with cortisol and circadian timing, you begin to see why 3 a.m. is not random, which is exactly what we need to examine next.
Here's what's happening inside your body at night. Under normal conditions, cortisol gradually lowers as evening progresses. The nervous system shifts from alertness into restoration mode. Melatonin begins coordinating the timing of deeper sleep cycles. Your breathing slows, your heart rate softens, and the sleep switch activates smoothly. But when the neural sleep inhibition response activates, that sequence becomes disrupted. Cortisol may rise earlier than it should, or it may fail to drop deeply enough. The nervous system remains subtly on guard, not in panic, just in partial vigilance. When this happens, the circadian rhythm loses precision. Instead of flowing naturally through sleep stages, the brain hovers in lighter phases. Deep sleep becomes harder to sustain. Small internal changes feel amplified. Normal nighttime shifts trigger micro-awakenings, and the system becomes easier to disturb. This is why 3 a.m. awakenings are so common. Around that time, the body naturally prepares for its gradual morning transition. If cortisol regulation is unstable, the rise can happen too abruptly. The brain senses activation. Brain alert mode switches on, and you are suddenly awake. You may not feel anxious, you may not feel stressed, but your brain interprets something internally as not fully safe, and safety is required for deep sleep to continue. So instead of staying in restoration mode, the nervous system shifts upward, just enough to wake you. It's important to understand this clearly. This is not a character flaw. It's not weakness. It's not you thinking too much. It's a protective biological response. And once you see how safety signaling influences this response, you start to understand why calming the system is very different from forcing sleep, which is what we need to explore next. After 40, the body naturally becomes more sensitive to cortisol fluctuations. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean something is failing. It's a gradual shift in how the brain interprets internal signals. Hormonal patterns become slightly less buffered than they were at 25. Small spikes that once went unnoticed now register more strongly, especially during the fragile transition between sleep cycles. And that increased sensitivity can change the entire night. Hormonal shifts subtly influence the circadian rhythm as well. Melatonin timing may drift a little earlier or later. Cortisol may begin rising too soon toward morning. The overlap between these two signals becomes less precise. When timing loses precision, sleep becomes easier to interrupt. Not dramatically at first, but consistently enough to feel frustrating. The nervous system may also take longer to power down. After 40, many people carry more responsibility, more cognitive load. Even when stress feels manageable, the brain adapts to higher alertness. Over time, that alertness becomes easier to trigger at night. The threshold for brain alert mode lowers, and the transition into deep sleep requires stronger safety signals, signals that are not always present. That's why many people suddenly struggle with insomnia after 40, even if they never had sleep problems before. They go to bed the same way they always have, they follow good routines, they limit caffeine, they try relaxation techniques, yet they still wake up at 3 a.m. or feel their brain won't shut off. This is not deterioration, it is increased biological sensitivity. The neural sleep inhibition response becomes easier to activate because cortisol fluctuations are felt more intensely. The circadian rhythm becomes slightly more fragile. The nervous system becomes more protective, and protection at night translates into lighter sleep. But sensitivity is not a life sentence. Sensitivity can be stabilized. The brain can recalibrate its nighttime thresholds. Cortisol timing can be gently supported. The circadian rhythm can regain stronger alignment, and the sleep switch can become more reliable again. The key is understanding exactly what stabilizes that system, which is what we're about to break down next. If you wake up at 3 a.m. every night and you already expect it before it even happens, that quiet frustration you feel is understandable. If your brain won't shut off no matter how calm the room is, and your thoughts begin moving the second you become aware, it can start to feel deeply personal, like something inside you is working against you. If you feel tired in the morning, no matter how long you stayed in bed, if coffee feels like survival instead of enjoyment, if your energy dips before the afternoon is even halfway over, it's easy to assume you're doing something wrong. Many people begin blaming their habits or blaming themselves. But this is not a discipline issue. It's not a motivation problem. It's not a mindset flaw. And it's not weakness. Your brain is not broken. It is responding according to its programming, even if that response feels frustrating. When the neural sleep inhibition response activates, the brain believes it is protecting you. It increases alertness just enough to prevent deep vulnerability. It maintains partial vigilance in case something is off, even when there is no visible threat, even when your bedroom is completely safe. Protection is the brain's priority. The problem is not that protection exists. The problem is that the threshold for protection has lowered. Cortisol fluctuations trigger alertness too easily. The nervous system stays slightly elevated. The circadian rhythm loses smoothness, and brain alert mode turns on faster than it should, especially in the early morning hours. The powerful part of this is what most people never hear. Protection can be gently recalibrated. The nervous system can relearn nighttime safety. Cortisol patterns can become more stable. The neural sleep inhibition response can soften, not by force, but by restoring the right biological signals, which is exactly where the solution begins to take shape. The goal is not to force sleep, not sedation, not overpowering the brain with something that shuts it down artificially. Because when sleep is forced, the underlying alert system often remains unchanged. You may feel temporarily unconscious, but the biology that triggered 3 a.m. awakenings is still quietly active beneath the surface. The real goal is different. It is to lower nighttime cortisol spikes before they surge, to stabilize the circadian rhythm so timing becomes predictable again, to calm the nervous system in a way that feels safe, not suppressed, and to support the natural sleep switch so it activates fully. This is about cooperation with the brain, not control over it.
When the neural sleep inhibition response begins to soften, the brain no longer feels the need to maintain partial vigilance. It stops scanning for internal imbalance. Cortisol rises become smoother and better timed. The nervous system shifts more confidently into restoration mode, and deep sleep stages become easier to sustain, not because they are forced, but because they are permitted. This is the shift most people never experience. They try to exhaust themselves into sleep. They try distraction, white noise, or mental tricks. But the sleep switch depends on biological safety signals. When those signals strengthen, the threshold for brain alert mode rises again, and nighttime becomes quieter internally. That is how you begin to sleep through the night again. Not by battling wakefulness, but by reducing the internal triggers that reactivate it. When the nervous system feels stable, 3 a.m. awakenings become less abrupt, falling back asleep becomes easier, and mornings feel less heavy. This is also how you learn how to stay asleep all night, by addressing the timing of cortisol, the alignment of the circadian rhythm, and the sensitivity of the neural sleep inhibition response itself. When those elements move back into balance, the brain allows deeper rest naturally, which raises an important question. What specific signals help create that stability in the first place? Because of this, many of my patients choose to support their sleep biology in a more structured way, not with something that overrides the brain, but with a doctor-approved natural nighttime formula designed to work alongside the body's existing systems. The intention is not to sedate, it is to provide consistent biological support where sensitivity has increased. The formula I often recommend is designed to help regulate cortisol patterns gently, especially during the vulnerable late-night window. It supports nervous system calm without dulling awareness during the day. It helps stabilize the circadian rhythm so timing becomes more predictable. And it promotes healthy melatonin signaling in alignment with the body's clock. Each element is selected to reinforce safety signals, not to overpower them. This is important to understand clearly. It's not a sleeping pill. It does not chemically force unconsciousness. It doesn't knock the brain offline. Instead, it supports the conditions that allow the neural sleep inhibition response to soften naturally. That distinction changes everything. When cortisol spikes are smoother, the nervous system does not jump into brain alert mode as easily. When circadian rhythm timing is steadier, 3 a.m. awakenings become less abrupt. When melatonin signaling is supported appropriately, the sleep switch activates more reliably, and the brain feels less need to maintain protection. This approach respects physiology. It works with the brain's biology rather than against it. There is no artificial shutdown, no dependency created by force, only reinforcement of systems that are already there. And for many people after 40, that subtle reinforcement makes a measurable difference. If you'd like to see the exact support I recommend, it's available in the first pinned comment below this video. But before you decide anything, there's one more piece you need to understand, because timing plays a critical role in how effective any support becomes, especially in the early morning hours when cortisol naturally begins to rise. And that timing is what we'll clarify next. But before you go, there's something essential you need to understand. We've talked about cortisol, we've talked about circadian rhythm timing, we've talked about the neural sleep inhibition response. But there is a very specific window during the night when all of these systems intersect, and that window explains more than most people realize.
In the next video, I'll explain something even more precise: why the brain tends to enter brain alert mode between 3 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., why that timing is not random, why so many people wake up at nearly the same hour, and why falling back asleep becomes unusually difficult during that specific biological shift. Around that time, cortisol naturally begins preparing the body for morning. In a stable system, that rise is gradual and quiet. But when timing is slightly misaligned, the increase can feel abrupt to the nervous system. The brain interprets activation as a signal to stay alert. The neural sleep inhibition response engages, and deep sleep is interrupted. This is why simply trying harder to relax doesn't work, because the trigger is hormonal and neurological. It's about timing and sensitivity. It's about how the circadian rhythm and cortisol interact. And it's about whether the brain feels safe enough to allow the sleep switch to remain fully on. Understanding this removes confusion. If you've been waking up at 3 a.m., you'll want to understand that connection in detail, because once you see the biological pattern clearly, the experience stops feeling random. It stops feeling like insomnia is attacking you, and it starts making structured physiological sense, which changes how you approach the solution. Staying asleep through the night stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling biological. And when something is biological, it can be supported intelligently. In the next video, I'll show you exactly how that 3 a.m. cortisol shift unfolds and what determines whether your brain stays asleep or switches back into alert mode.